Recognize two titans in the veterans community that we lost this month, Bob Dole and Max Cleland. Both these men are decorated war veterans, severely injured during service, who continued to serve their country, including here in the United States Senate. They never stopped giving back and trying to find common ground to solve tough problems. And our nation owes them a debt of gratitude, as they both are examples for all of us to follow. I will tell you, I knew both these men, and quality was number one. These folks, irreplaceable. And now I want to turn back to the focus of this hearing. Mr. DelBene, I truly appreciate your willingness to serve. I also want to welcome your wife and your rest of your family that are here today. It is my hope and the hope of this committee that you are up to this task. I believe after our meeting in my office a few days ago, there's little doubt in my mind that you are. The members of this committee that have met with you and you have submitted written responses to the pre-hearing questions, I want to thank you for that. But your testimony and your answers today is going to help this committee make the final determination. If confirmed, you would be responsible for managing all VA information technology matters, from broadband and VA facilities to staff laptops to cybersecurity efforts on behalf of VA employees and veterans. So, quite honestly, if your office doesn't work well, employees can't do their jobs. Veterans may not get their GI Bill payments on time, and an app for veterans to schedule their healthcare appointments just might not work. And while your office is not currently in charge of the Cerner AHR program at the VA, that program can't recover without a well-functioning OIT office. More often than not, when Congress passes new legislation for the VA, OIT is called upon to deliver IT solutions to ensure the law is implemented effectively. And while there have been successes, there have also been significant IT challenges at the VA. So today I'm interested in hearing about how, if confirmed, you will leverage your considerable experience over the last 2 decades of private sector work to apply to this VA. One of my ongoing priorities has been a bipartisan bill I've worked on with the ranking member and others to increase the transparency of VA's IT operation. That way Congress can better judge the VA's performance and understand what authorities, guardrails, and funding may be needed to generate better outcomes. When we get that bill signed into law, and if you are confirmed, I look forward to working with you on implementing it. If we didn't know it before, the COVID-19 pandemic has clearly demonstrated that IT can, when managed correctly, provide veterans and VA employees with important tools to deliver care and benefits when in-person visits are not possible. I look forward to hearing about your views to strengthen VA's IT operations. Again, I truly want to thank you for your willingness to serve and look forward to your testimony. And
Senator Moran is going to stay on the floor, so if you would like to do an intro for the nominee and then swear him in, I think we can get started.
okay. So a little bit about Kurt DelBene. Kurt is a technology executive that spent over 15 years of his career as a senior executive at Microsoft. He retired from Microsoft in September of 2021 as Executive Vice President of Corporate Strategy, Core Services Engineering, and Operations, leading the company's cross-engineering and cross-business strategy, executing and planning initiatives. From December 2013 to July 2014, after the website's initial failure, he was brought in to help fix healthcare.gov as a senior advisor to the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Mr. DelBene helped assess and implement the path through the first open enrollment period, including troubleshooting issues encountered along the way and setting the project up for long-term success. Now, prior to joining Microsoft, Kurt DelBene was a management consultant with McKinsey & Company, focusing on business strategy for technology companies. He has also worked as a software developer and systems engineer for AT&T Bell Laboratories, working in graphics and imaging software and network switching systems. Kurt DelBene holds a Master of Business Administration degree from the University of Chicago, a Master's of Science degree from Stanford University, and a Bachelor's of Industrial Engineering from the University of Arizona. Kurt DelBene is married to Democratic Congresswoman Susan DelBene, who has represented Washington's 1st Congressional District since 2012. Mr. DelBene, could you please stand and raise your right hand? Do you, Kurt DelBene, solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give before the U.S. Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Let the record reflect that Mr. DelBene answered in the affirmative. You can go proceed with your testimony.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Tester, Ranking Member Moran, and distinguished members of the committee. My personal thanks also to our great senator from Washington State, Patty Murray, for her support throughout the way. It's my true honor to be nominated as the Assistant Secretary for the Office of Information and Technology and Chief Information Officer of the Department of Veterans Affairs, and to have an opportunity to talk with you today. I'd like to start by introducing and thanking my family who's with me this morning or this afternoon and for their support. As you said, my wife Susan is a member of the House of Representatives representing Washington State's 1st Congressional District. Our daughter Rebecca works in philanthropy in the Seattle area. Our son Zach is a software developer, and his partner Lisa is a software program manager. I'm so proud of them and thankful for their support through the years. I'm honored to be considered to serve as the CIO and to serve our nation's veterans. My father served in the United States Army in World War II, and my stepfather served in the U.S. Navy. I grew up with the deepest respect for our military and for veterans who have committed themselves to the difficult and often dangerous work of defending us. I grew up in a family where service to others is a priority. My mother was a therapist specializing in helping people struggling from substance abuse. My father was a counselor of troubled, incarcerated youth. My sister is a director of nursing at UW Medical Center. My wife, Susan, has dedicated herself to serving our nation in Congress. I'm also proud of our daughter's work with Youth Eastside Services, helping troubled youths. All these are examples of service that have helped reinforce in me a personal responsibility to serve to the greatest extent I'm able. This priority is what called me to help fix the Affordable Care Act website, healthcare.gov, when it failed, and it's what drives my passion to serve the VA, our veterans, and their families today. I've spent most of my professional career at Microsoft. During that time, I had the honor to act as the executive sponsor of the Department of Defense and to serve at the DoD's Defense Innovation Board, a board of tech professionals and academics that helps some of the DoD's hardest problems get solved. In both of these capacities, I've experienced over and over the commitment, the intelligence, the devotion that our men and women in the armed forces have for our nation, our citizens, and for each other. From these experiences, I've developed a deep-seated belief that veterans, their families, and their caregivers deserve our strongest possible commitment to support throughout their lives. If confirmed, I'm excited to leverage my experience leading large software development projects and teams of similar size and complexity to help our nation's veterans, to leverage best practices in commercial software development to strengthen the IT processes in the VA, and to further enhance the already established culture of excellence. I believe there's never been a more important time for IT excellence to play a role in the VA and in government overall. Information systems are at the heart of delivering critical services to veterans, especially now that the modernization of critical systems is underway. The department is undertaking a large and complex replacement of their electronic medical record system, updating their financial management and logistics systems, and making critical enhancements to their benefits systems to enable support for caregivers. Excellence in delivering on the core mission of the VA depends on success of these systems transformations. That's what drives me to step up and serve at this critical moment. I've led similar, highly complex transformations in my time as a senior executive at Microsoft. I led the Microsoft Office organization during its transformation from on-premises software to a world-class cloud service. I led the transformation of our internal systems development teams into a world-class software development organization. I believe that the same transformation is possible and within our grasp, not just for the VA, for the entire government as well. I don't come to this potential role thinking that tech can solve everything or that commercial best practices can be transferred as is to a large and complex organization like the VA. I do, however, believe that for such projects to be successful, they must start with a clear vision, a clear development plan, success metrics, and strong collaboration partnerships with all stakeholders, including members of Congress. Members play a critical role in oversight, enabling legislation, and critical veteran support work that I've seen countless times in Susan's office. I believe that OIT can be a truly world-class organization and can be the source of great pride for the VA, just as the healthcare and benefits provided to the veterans and their families in the department are today. This sense of pride can in turn further enhance the team's capabilities and their joy and satisfaction in the work that they do. So I'm here today both humbled and excited by the challenges of the Office of Information and Technology has in front of it. If confirmed, I commit to do everything in my power to deliver on the core mission of the VA, build a world-class technology organization, and to use it to serve our veterans, their families, and caregivers. Thank you, and I look forward to our discussion today.
I want to thank you for your statement, Mr. DelBene. And I will also tell you that I look forward to getting you confirmed so you can get on the job and start doing what I think can be some really, really, really good work for our veterans in this nation. So if you are confirmed, one of the challenges you're going to face is how to prioritize which projects and areas get IT funding. Maintaining old systems versus replacing the new equipment versus funding new projects. So you have considerable experience, and from that experience in the private sector, how would you approach setting up a process so that every part of VA has its top IT needs addressed?
Right. It's a great question. Thank you for that. And you inevitably get in this situation where the money doesn't meet all the demands that everybody would have. I think for me, the goal is to first, if I was confirmed, I think I'd jump in and understand all the needs across the entire organization and really start with what's the vision for that organization, what are the key things that need to get accomplished next. And then you really got to stack rank the priorities for each organization super clearly. There can be only one priority one followed by a priority two, et cetera. And that's actually a challenging thing to do in and of its own right. You have to do that in collaboration with stakeholders so that they agree that those are the relative priorities. And then you have to bring it together across the different silos, if you will, or the different investment portfolios, and then have the really difficult discussion of how do you trade off what seems to be different things that they're all high priority. I think there you need to step back to the overall mission of the organization, collaborate with the peers and with the secretary, understand what all of their priorities are, and really come to that clear understanding. At some point, there's always going to be those trade-offs, and things that don't get prioritized as highly, you try to find workarounds, and some things you just have to defer and are going to get done in the future. But again, the things that you do, you need to make sure are clearly the high priority for the entire organization.
Thank you for that. I want to reserve my 3 minutes and 15 seconds I have left and turn it over to the good senator from Washington.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. And Kurt, it's great to see you here. Thank you so much. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Moran, I'm glad we're having this hearing here today. It is a real pleasure for me to have the opportunity to, although he's already been reintroduced to you, Kurt DelBene, as this committee considers his nomination to serve as Assistant Secretary for the Office of Information and Technology and Chief Information Office of the Department of Veterans Affairs. I think everybody on this committee really understands the seriousness of our obligation has to our veterans, that when people serve this country, they come home, we take care of them the best we can. And part of living up to that commitment is building the kind of technological infrastructure that has really been missing at the VA. It is well past time that the VA move into the 21st century, and Mr. DelBene is uniquely qualified to lead this effort. Top of mind for me, as the chairman knows, has been the really unacceptable system failure since the rollout of the new electronic health record system being piloted at Spokane VAMC in my home state of Washington and Kurtz. There's absolutely no reason in 2021 of the United States of America should not be able to deploy a state-of-the-art electronic health record system. And when it comes to the health of our veterans, the VA needs to be doing everything it can to get this right. And I am here today and really happy to introduce Mr. DelBene because I believe he's the right person for this job. And for me, it comes down to a couple of key determinations. First of all, he's qualified. His work as a senior executive at Microsoft means he will be able to hit the ground running and lead on upgrading VA systems. Managing major projects in large organizations requires experience, and Mr. DelBene has a proven track record here. At Microsoft, he served on the Defense Innovation Board to help the Department of Defense come up with solutions to some of the toughest technological problems facing our military. And I think this is very important. He stepped up and led the private sector to help fix healthcare.gov. Wading in and trying to fix the Affordable Care Act website was not glamorous work. If anything, Mr. DelBene signed up for a very tough, high-stakes job in a politically charged environment. But he kept his head down, he did the work, and he delivered because millions of families were counting on him. This is what we need to see at the VA. Mr. DelBene comes from my home state of Washington, and he's someone who believes in serving others. His record shows it, and he's grown up all his life around his family who lives the same values. Many of us know the character of his wife, our colleague in the House, Congresswoman Susan DelBene. And I believe it really matters that we do appoint someone qualified who's ready to do this job for the right reasons, because this work is going to be hard and the stakes are high. But I have spoken with Mr. DelBene, and he is up to this task. I believe in his vision and his passion to bring VA into the 21st century. And here on the Veterans Affairs Committee, Republicans and Democrats have always been able to find common ground in order to make sure this government is living up to its promise to our veterans. Because at the end of the day, I believe everyone on this committee is firmly committed to getting the job done for the women and men who serve this country. So let's confirm someone for this job who can get it done. I urge this committee, Mr. Chairman, to waste no time in advancing this nomination so he can be confirmed and get to work for our veterans as soon as possible. And Mr. Chairman, I have several questions. I will just submit them for the record, but thank you for allowing me to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I couldn't agree with you more, Senator Murray. I think we have an incredible opportunity. I'm going to get to you in a second, Senator Hirono. We have an incredible opportunity to get somebody into the VA doing the work in IT that needs to be done that I really think we can have confidence in. So we'll revert back to that. Senator Hirono, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. It's very clear that the two of you have utmost confidence in Mr. DelBene. Mr. DelBene, I asked the following two initial questions of every nominee who appears before any of the committees on which I sit, so I will ask you these initial questions. Since you have become a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
I have not.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No, I have not.
So one of the major issues that we've been tackling in the VA is the issue of the electronic health records, and I note that your responsibility explicitly does not put you in charge of the electronic health record modernization program. And I'm just wondering why not, because you're the guy, you're the IT guy. Why aren't you in charge of the system that we have spent over $1 billion, and only now are we saying that we have a system that kind of, does what we expected to do, as well as I think we're trying to get it in alignment with the the records of the active while the people are in active service.
Well, thank you for your question. There was a reorganization, as you well know, in the VA that was announced last week of creating an executive director who would be responsible to the deputy directly, the deputy secretary, to really focus on that project, and then functional leaders underneath that would really take the perspective of healthcare and the patient, of IT and policy. And so I think that the goal there is to get somebody really, really focused and have the deputy secretary really dig in and lead that and feel that sense of responsibility. Having said that, I believe that there's an opportunity for me to take the experience that I've had in the private sector and in working on the Affordable Care Act's website to help. And I think you can count on me jumping in, getting involved with those teams to really see every place that I can provide my background, my understanding, and help there. I think that's distinguished from the whole notion of who would be the particular leader.
I think that whoever is going to be leading EHRM has to have the kind of background and experience that apparently you have. And so I hope that whoever is doing that actually can do it and that as you seek to work with that person, in fact, is that person in place already?
The person
To do
that would be the overall director, I believe they've announced
HRM?
who that person would be, yes.
Okay, so I hope that that you will have that opportunity, and there's not going to be this siloing of responsibilities, so that all of the experience that you can bring to bear is not fully utilized. As we look at IT challenges, so clarify for me, because you are going to be the assistant secretary for information and technology. So is it information to the veterans themselves that you would be also responsible for?
It's the systems that service or that care is delivered via. And so all of the if you think about the main systems that are IT systems, being responsible for how they're developed, how they're maintained, and ultimately how that capability is delivered to the end user. I really think that it's important to look at it end to end in that way. If you think about, there are people who build systems and think about it only from the perspective of, does it do exactly what it's expected? I think you have to start with, what are you trying to accomplish for the end user? And that's how I approach
And
things.
isn't the end user the veteran?
Yes, it is.
So I talk with a lot of veterans who don't rely on the internet, for example, for information from the VA. And one of the concerns is that there's a lot of information that never gets to the veterans in a way that they understand what kind of benefits and resources they can look to. So is that part of what you are going to be responsible for? That
Well,
this information actually gets to them?
I think you're talking about some of the complexities that exist in the problem of actually serving veterans with these systems. I think in cases where they're not computer literate themselves, oftentimes there'll be somebody, a caregiver or a member of the VA that will help them. But you also have to go back to not just the vets that are computer literate, but the entire population, and figure out, are they all getting care, and what can you do to actually improve care, even if you're less literate in the systems themselves. So it becomes a complex and multifaceted problem.
Yes, and I'm particularly interested in all those veterans out there who do not have who do not access the kind of tools that you're talking about.
Right.
I'm also really interested in your development of telemedicine as a way to really ensure that the veterans get the care they need, as well as I have a bill that I've been working on that I'm going to want to work with you, having to do with just data collection and access to data that will enable the VA to really understand the veterans and their I guess identifying information that will enable us to better meet their needs. So that's something that I'd like to be in touch with you on.
Well,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I'd look forward to
Where'd he go?
working with you on that.
Am I left to my own devices? Oh,
My turn.
yes, please, Senator Tupperville.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Just me and you. We can sit here and make conversation. I saw everybody else going to vote. But, and thank you for your willingness to serve, and what you're doing is going to help a lot of folks. In Alabama, we have 400,000 veterans in our state, and got a lot of VAs, and we got problems as everybody else. But we need to take care of our veterans. I came from a military family. I understand it. You've worked in a major implementation effort with healthcare.gov. Currently, the VA is undergoing a massive multi-pronged modernization effort addressing financial management, healthcare records, and supply chain management. What challenges did you encounter while rolling out healthcare.gov, and how would you apply your lessons learned to ensure a successful rollout of FMBT, EHRM, and supply chain modernization?
Well, thank you for the question. I think there's a number of learnings from the rollout of healthcare.gov that are appropriate here or applicable here. The first thing is the way they approach that problem is essentially define an architecture and then sub it out to different contractors and have them work largely autonomous with each other and then bring it back together in the end. And so it probably isn't very surprising that when it came back together, it actually didn't function. And a lot of there was a bit of finger pointing about, like, is this in my part of the system or is this in your part of the system? it really gets down to you need to have a team that works across these contractors in a complex way as a single team, and that nobody's pointing fingers at each other as to where the problem resides. The second thing is we brought people in from the security portion of the organization, from the end user help part of the organization, and created a virtual team across all the stakeholders to make sure that we had the representation of all the problems that we're seeing. And the third thing I would say, which was really critical, is really to get clear on priorities. And you can't, when you get into an organization that isn't functioning as well as it is, everything is priority one. Yet you can't do everything as first priority at the same time. So you've got to strictly say, these are the things we're going to get accomplished in this order. And then you have to have transparency with stakeholders and with external organizations to say, look, this is the stuff we're not going to get done for now. And we know why. We'll explain to you why that's not getting done. And this is the stuff you can count on us delivering to you right now. And so a lot of that is what we kind of take for granted in the commercial space is how you function. But it's something that we can bring, I think, to the health records management project and to all the projects in the VA.
I can't imagine all the different entities that you work with. Being a football coach, just trying to put people together and working together is hard enough. I can't imagine all over this country doing the new implementation. People are your most important asset in this business. Most of the Office of Information Technology's resources go toward basic operations, like keeping the networks running, but you also need software development, and you need talent. You need a core group of people who probably could make a lot more money in the private sector. We all know that. I mean, the big tech is really hurting a lot of people, when it comes to making money. I've got a son graduating this Saturday. He's already got a job in big tech, and because it was easy. There's not many out there. What types of software development skills are most important in what you're getting ready to do, and how are you going to recruit and retain these people, that you're going to need to implement this?
It's a great question, and something that I've given a lot of thought to. As you say, the differences in salaries between the public sector and the private sector are very large today.
Coaching and being a senator is a lot different. Y'all seen the salary. So same thing.
I think there's a couple of things I think are important. I think you have to figure out what are the linchpin roles, the critical roles, whether that's the quarterback on the field or the tight end, and figure out how are you going to create a process for how we work that leverages those key capabilities and has those people in the right place. So for instance, at Microsoft, we have a really critical role called a program manager, or many in the industry call it a product manager. Those are people who understand the needs very deeply of projects, but also can dive deep into what the details are of the program. And so if you're thinking about, you're probably still going to have to outsource a lot of the software development to contractors, but it needs to be a deep interconnectedness that program manager plays a really important role. And so if the organization can transform itself to be very focused on what the status is and the progress is on those key projects, and if we can get really world-class program managers, for example, in those key roles that are interacting deeply with contractors, I think we can change the tenor of the organization to be really energized in the role of delivering to veterans, which is an energizing, occupation and thing to be engaged in to begin with. I think we can also have pathways where it's clear you can start your career in the VA and move into the private sector and be very successful, and also move from the private sector into the VA to deliver on the needs of those veterans as well.
In Microsoft, did y'all use a lot of subcontractors? I mean, did you go out and use them, and do you foresee maybe doing that in this endeavor?
We did. We used to say that we would use a subcontractor in a place where it wasn't the critical system we were developing, but we're in a very different position in our ability to actually hire software developers. I think we're going to have to continue to outsource more or have more subcontractors in the VA, but it's not it can't be as much of an arm's length transaction. It has to be a place where we deeply understand what's going on in those projects, and we're kind of part of that team as opposed to thinking of it more arm's length. So I think there's a model here that doesn't require, you hear a lot of people talking about, we just need to have tons and tons of software developers in the VA. We would benefit from more software developers in the VA. But if we can get this rich model working that has good interaction, I think we can accomplish our goals.
Well, thank you, and good luck to you. It's going to be a hard endeavor, but we look forward to helping you. So thanks for your service. Chairman Tester, this will go on my resume as a chairman at one time of the Veterans Affairs Committee for about 10 minutes. So
Never been done better. I'll just tell you
thank you
that.
very much.
Senator TT.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. DelBene, thank you for being here. You've got an impressive resume. I look forward to supporting your nomination. One thing I was curious about, have you been read into the organizational changes, the program office, or I think they call it the enterprise office for the EHRM?
Not deeply. I've seen the press that's been announced, and that's about the level that I've seen it at this point.
Well, I think it's healthy. I think it's going to be important to have people in there to mobilize the organizational structure, stand up the joint office with the DOD. But I think your experience can be a great accelerator there. You know, when we were, I spent my career in IT and enterprise implementation work, and it wasn't a surprise to me when they rolled out the first iteration of the HRM up in the Northwest that they were going to run into problems. A part of that's just the nature of change management, enterprise transformation. A part of it is a lot of legacy systems and a lot of different practices for doing the same thing. Are you familiar with the concept of an application inventory and comprehensive inventory reconciliation? Do you think that's something the VA needs to do to better prepare for future implementations?
Well, I think it's always important to understand the entire landscape of all the systems that you have out there, how they're interconnected. If nothing else, from a security perspective, you need, as you from working the industry know, you need to understand that landscape to find out the points of vulnerability, the places where you need to enhance things, and just for the security, the privacy of the information, et cetera. So I do agree that, and it is my nature when I go into roles to understand the entire landscape. And from there, distill it, as we always do, into the priorities, which are the systems that are working okay now, which are the systems that are in desperate need of improvement as well. So yes, I agree on having that broad brush, but very deep understanding of everything in the domain.
Tell me a little bit about how your concept of ruthless prioritization worked in coming in and getting healthcare.gov on sound footing.
Well, as I said, when we entered as a team, there were a lot of priority ones, and especially when the team is just trying to improve their own execution. As you well know from your time in industry, that's the time when the team needs to get focused. And so we were looking at cases where first, early on, people couldn't actually get through the system at all, so you couldn't get people to get health care. Beyond that, it came to the point where there would be people showing up at the hospital that thought they had health care insurance but actually didn't. So the most important thing for us early on was to get claims adjudicated. And in that kind of a world, you need to talk about what are the features that are needed and fixes just to get adjudication working. And so you take the prioritization across those most important things. At the same time, you look very clearly to things you're just not going to get to. And so things like the financial reconciliation in the back end, we knew we had some time to do that. But we also knew we were going to get some grief of people saying, why aren't you doing this work? And we were very clear and said, we're not doing that work because we've got other higher priority work that we've got to get done first. And so that's kind of the notion of ruthless prioritization. You don't get to have two P1s. There's only one P1 followed by a P2 and down the line from there.
When you're confirmed, and I hope we can do it on an expedited basis, because I think it's going to be important for some of the transformation efforts that I agree with within the department. What are your first 120 days going to look like?
Well, I think it's important, one, to understand the people involved. What's the team look like? What are the strengths and challenging areas in the organization? So that's certainly one part of it. I tend to be the kind of a person who gets deeply involved in the project and understanding everything that's going on everywhere. You can't understand to the minutest detail, but I love to get into the details and understand things. Understanding what's going on with stakeholders. So I am very interested, for instance, as we talked about, of what are the challenges that have happened in the EHR system, what are the key things that need to get changed, and understanding that, that's one of a number of projects across the board. So my first 120 days, I'd like to understand the organization, have a vision for where that organization is going, have a look at what all the projects are, and get into that prioritization of what's the work that's got to be done in connection with the stakeholders, and really get on that rhythm of starting to get success upon success where you're delivering for end users, in this case, veterans.
Once you're confirmed, I'm confident you will be, I'd like to have your commitment for me to be able to come over to your turf and meet with the program office for the EHRM and not do anything but listen to a good program office review, see that prioritization in place, and continue to convince me that we've got the right people on the ground to deal with some of the toe stubbings we had in the first rollout. But I think we've got a well-articulated plan, and I want to do everything I can to help see it realized.
I would welcome that kind of collaboration. I think that transparency and really getting into partnership with stakeholders is really kind of central to how I like to work, and so I'd welcome that.
Thank you, and thank you for being willing to do the job.
Thank you.
Senator Cassidy online. He's gone. The honorable, most honorable gentleman and ranking member, JMO.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. DelBene, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you for your interest in serving in this capacity. The Office of Legal Counsel at the Department of Justice issued an opinion letter in 2017 stating that oversight requests from, quote, individual members of Congress, including ranking minority members, do not trigger any obligation to accommodate congressional needs. Knowing your family history, I hope you find that offensive. And I would ask you that despite the DOJ's opinion on this matter, will you commit to accommodating congressional oversight requests regardless of party affiliation or committee status of the member making the request?
Well, thank you for that question. I think that's the way the VA has worked with both the majority and minority, and you have my commitment to honoring the requests that you have, because we're all in this together, and it's all about making sure everybody has the information needed to play their role.
Thank you. And I don't think I take that as an answer being yes, you will provide the information requested. And I don't think that puts you outside anybody else that we've confirmed at the Department of Veterans Affairs. The VA requested less funding for OIT in its FY22 budget request compared to last year. At the average federal agency IT budget is roughly 9.8% of their agency's discretionary budget. The VA's IT budget is less than 5% of overall discretionary spending. In an era of increasing demand for information technology, explain to me how you will be successful with such a small budget that is not keeping up with the growth and demand of the department, as well as staff shortages of over 4,000 IT specialists.
Well, thank you for the question. Right now, I'm not well read into the budget requests.
Part about the budget may just have been putting people on notice, but I assume that you would have an opinion as to about the needs that you will have, financial and otherwise.
I think it's super important in the role to understand the budget very deeply. And when I led my organizations in Microsoft, we would get very detailed in understanding what are all the different programs, what is the amount of money allocated to each one of those programs, and then talking about which ones are sufficient and which ones are inadequate. And so I think one of the very first things I will do is understand not just what the projects are in terms of the work, but in terms of the funding levels and whether they're adequate. And then I think if they are not adequate, we need to come back and have a discussion about how we can improve. You can either prove the efficiency and effectiveness of the work you're doing, or you can figure out how you're going to change the resource levels for those to be appropriate. Please.
No, please, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I was just going to say, I do think benchmarks like the percentage of budgets that are allocated towards IT are important ones. And for that number to be out of line with industry standards, I think it's something you can look to see whether the funding level is appropriate or not.
Thank you. Several members of this committee are members of the Appropriations Committee that funds the Department of Veterans Affairs, and this is a good forum for you to make your case. I think my understanding is the chairman has to leave, and I'm going to close out the hearing after other members have had the chance to ask questions, and I may have a couple of more questions. But while the chairman's here, a couple of topics I wanted to raise in my opening statement, unrelated to the witness today. I want to acknowledge the date in history. Yesterday, December the 7th, and the 80th anniversary of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, which put the United States into the World War with the Axis powers. And I would want to express my gratitude to all those who served in World War II. And once again, we would say thank you. Secondly, I would note in this, perhaps the same vein, but a more personal one, I would note the passing of Senator Bob Dole. And I appreciate the committee's efforts to acknowledge and honor his life and his service to the nation. And I appreciate my colleagues in the Senate who have expressed their condolences to me as a Kansan and me as a personal friend of Senator Dole. And I have indicated numerous times in my comments, public and private, that I'm of the belief, and I don't know this, but my impression, my understanding would be that Senator Bob Dole's life in the United States Senate, in the Congress, as a presidential candidate, as a vice presidential candidate, was hugely formed by the circumstances he encountered, first at home in a small town in Kansas, but secondly, his experience in the Army and his tremendous, horrific injuries that he encountered, changing his life forever in what we would know in a physical way, but creating a commitment to public service to people with disabilities, veterans. We were at the World War II Memorial this morning, in which we paid honor to Senator Dole. Again, a tribute that he helped create in a significant way. He created, and I've been to the World War II Memorial with many honor flights in which Senator Dole would be there, and he didn't come to be on a pedestal or receive the applause of veterans who came to see the memorial. He was there to thank those veterans for their service, and I would just use this as a moment to remind my colleagues of a tremendous service by a great veteran, one who happens to be from Kansas. Finally, well, if you want to say something, Mr.
Well, I would just say this, entirely appropriate, and in my opening statement, I did talk about Senator Dole and talked about Max Cleveland, Senator Cleveland, too. Both people who I think you and I would both agree we need more of in this world, and neither one will be replaced. There's no doubt about that. But people who set an example that we can aspire to.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I do share those views. I would indicate, you caused me to think of something else, which is that Senator Dole was cared for by the Department of Veterans Affairs in a VA hospital in Michigan, where just by circumstance, perhaps fate, he was treated at the same time that the later Senator Dan Inouye was treated at the same hospital. They became friends and then disappeared from each other's lives, only to rediscover each other in the United States Senate. And the same was true from Senator Hart, who was also at the VA hospital, now at Dole VA Hospital in Michigan. And it is another reminder of how important the Department of Veterans Affairs and its hospitals and its benefits are to those who served our nation. And I also would just, perhaps more in passing, to say that this year, 2021, marks the 50th anniversary of this committee's existence. And Mr. Chairman and my fellow committee members, I would express the gratitude I have to serve on this committee with you. And I am pleased to continue to be able to tell my constituents it's the last haven, I hope not the last, but seemingly the last haven of bipartisanship. And I hope we can spread the way that we do business in this committee to all the other committees I serve on and all the committees that we serve on in the United States Senate. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the manner in which you treat me, and sometimes I have the sense that you treat my colleagues on the Republican side better than you treat the ranking member, but beyond that, you treat us all pretty darn well.
Well, they're nicer. No, I didn't say that.
Sometimes better than the majority side, too.
What I would have to say to all that is just, amen, brother. Senator Manchin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. DelBene, appreciate you being here and appreciate you willing to serve at this capacity. Your pre-hearing questions, you acknowledge the need to expand broadband to veterans in rural areas. I come from West Virginia. My entire state is rural. I don't have one city larger than 50,000. The largest city in West Virginia is 49,000 people. So I have a state of towns, and they're wonderful. But basically, we are rural. And broadband to veterans in rural areas need the access that they have in urban areas. But to be VA benefits and healthcare, we couldn't even do telehealth. We had to do audio-only telehealth and then be reimbursed. And just an unbelievable situation. So I would say, if confirmed, how will you balance expanding initiatives like telehealth while also ensuring that rural veterans have access to broadband, that you can interact with FCC, things of that sort, showing where your real problem areas are?
Thank you for the question. And I think you hint on a couple of the areas that I think are really key there. For one, there's a signal that will come out of the VA of where the health care is needed. Absolutely. And where there are gaps. And I think it's important for us, and we can use the data that we have in systems and elsewhere in the VA to inform, hey, here's the relative priorities of where we need to improve.
What I
this.
might ask you to do there, it's really important, the maps, the FCC maps have been horrible. They're showing basically coverage where there's no coverage. And that's because it has been self-reporting from the broadband or internet services themselves. They're showing larger swaths of America that they're covering when they're not. And that gives them a little bit more areas. Anyway, the maps, working in the maps first and identifying and looking at the FCC maps, we've been trying to correct those. You all could be invaluable in helping correct that.
I think that's right. I think we can basically look at where we have gaps in service, where we can't go in and telehealth, and contrast that with where the map is and identify those places where maybe a change in the priority needs to exist so that we can actually get that coverage. The other thing I think you can think about is telehealth at different levels. You know, a device that is a cuff that connects via cellular to the VA to monitor blood pressure is another solution. So you don't have to think of it as all full audio video telehealth. There are gradations there, and we need to think about how we deliver on multiple levels and expand it overall.
I'm saying, sir, you're going to have the opportunity to bring the VA into the technology world, really, and increase that. And we need that desperately, really do.
I couldn't agree more.
Professional areas in the state and all over the country, in the VA hospitals and C boxes and everything else, they're in high demand of needing quality personnel. So whether it be cybersecurity, whether it be nurses, whether it be doctors, whatever it be, it's difficult for government agencies to keep up with the private sector in competing for the people of those high value jobs. So I guess I would ask, what's your plans and goals to recruit and retain the talent that's going to be needed to implement and maintain the VA's many IT sectors?
I think a lot of it comes down to how do you define the organization and create an organization that is a modern kind of state-of-the-art IT organization so that somebody looks at it as an opportunity. A college graduate in tech looks at it as a great place to start his or her career. How do you take somebody from the private sector and say, oh my gosh, there's a set of skills that I can learn here that are valuable in the private sector, and by the way, energize them around the mission that they have today. And so we need to create an organization that is very state-of-the-art in terms of, you know, focused on vision, execution, agile development, and I think that'll be an attractor of talent.
I always thought that the prime spot for you all to recruit from is the military.
I think there's a huge opportunity
Because
there.
basically people that have served are going to be very sympathetic in understanding the needs of veterans. And there's a lot of people with high skill sets that can be brought in and be taught basically on these areas. I don't know what the VA is doing now in recruitment as far as active military that's going to be mustering out, if you will, if we're really going after that segment.
I don't know at this point in time. I couldn't agree with you more. If ever
It's a natural.
If there were a skill set that you could inculcate in people leaving the military that would be valuable.
Well, you'd
for
want to
the
get people
private service.
sympathetic to the military. The
I'm sorry?
understanding that you'd want to, you know, some people that don't serve, you know, we only have 1% of our population is basically in the
Right.
professional military. But people that don't serve might not have the same desire or the same sympathy that we have and empathy for people that do serve. But people in the military should. And I don't know if that's a good recruitment or if we've been using that to the full extent.
I think there is, but I think there's more we can do there.
Well,
so
I
I'd
hope
be
so.
excited to work
I
on
hope
that.
so, sir. I look forward to it. Only thing I'm saying is that monitoring as far as medical records, things of that sort, getting that integrated has been so challenging. And I'm hoping that you all be looking at that because, you know, for us to have time-sensitive information when a person comes in, especially on opiates, the addiction of opiates that we have. I had a person one time tell me, I kept saying, you know, we have so much addiction in the military. It's just ridiculous. And our veterans, going to the Veterans Administration or the hospitals. So I asked a nurse one time says, well, if you politicians wouldn't call all the time raising Cain about, we won't give these veterans what they want, you know, because we used to basically, the veterans would report on the quality of care they're getting.
Mm-hmm.
If they didn't get the type of drugs they wanted, they report very bad, and they make a hospital have a bad report. We took that off of the reporting that they can't. Dispensing of medication is not one of the areas where we're going to basically evaluate that hospital. Do they give quality care, best of care, mediocre care? Because it was always based around, did you get the drugs you want? But what happens is we truly don't have the records that are following that patient. A VA patient that might go from clinic to clinic to clinic, whether they're pill shopping or whatever. That's something that needs to really be looked into.
Well, if confirmed, Senator, I think that'd be a great area to look into and
look
figure out
for-
what does the data say and what do we hear from
Right.
patients as well.
Well, you can talk to some of the people, some of the nurses that are in that, men and women who work in those departments, and they'll just be unbelievable what they'll tell you. We've learned a lot, but we'd be happy to work for them. We have a tremendous opiate addiction problem in West Virginia, and everyone's affected. So we want to make sure that this is an illness, has to be served. We can't be dispensing what we shouldn't be dispensing. But with that, Mr. Chairman,
Senator Manchin, thank you very
thank you,
much.
sir.
We'll always try to treat you respectfully. Mr. DelBene, Congress is often, constantly, in fact, asking the VA for data as part of our oversight responsibilities. We're looking for information that unfortunately the VA too often responds to us that the data is not tracked in a way that we're asking for it, if at all. If confirmed, how would you incorporate enterprise data requirements into the modernization efforts to make certain that the VA can measure its inputs and outputs and hopefully demonstrate the positive impacts the programs are having on veterans?
I think that's a great question. It gets to me, some of the things that we do in the private sector, you will look at a problem and you'll think that the data that is presented first is the answer to the problem. What's most important, I think, is to step back and say, what's the root question here? And then what is data that will actually go to support what you want to understand, the true question behind the question, if you will. And so I think what's important is for us to get into a discussion where we say, what are we trying to measure here? What are the measures that would be best to actually come to the right conclusion in that particular system? Sometimes that'll be information that exists in the system. Sometimes it won't. And if it isn't, we can kind of come around it from a different angle and say, well, is there information that's a good proxy for that? But I think what it amounts to is getting into that back and forth discussion with you as to what's the best way to answer the question that you're really looking to answer.
I think a goal of mine would be to get to the point in which there's not a standard reply that we don't have data to answer your question. And if you'd work with us, one, how we ask the question, or find a different way to answer the question that we're asking, that would be useful.
I think that's a great characterization. If you don't have the data, the next question ought to be, well, let's step back and figure out what are you trying to answer, what question are you trying to answer, and how can we answer it?
I like your answer, thank you. Electronic health records, the modernization effort is so critical. How would you describe to me the CIO's role and how you intend, with the cooperation from the others at the VA who are responsible for electronic health records, to get us to the point we need to be?
Well, thanks for the question. I think part of this is I need to get, if confirmed, I would like to dig in and understand how the Secretary and the leadership are thinking about leading in this new world with the new announcement in terms of the organization structure. The direct responsibilities clearly are the infrastructure that the system builds on top of is the responsibility of the OIT department, and I certainly want to have excellence there. But I think there's also an opportunity for me to take the learnings that I've had from the private sector and figure out how do you use those to make sure you have success in the project overall, in collaboration with the leadership structure that he's put in place. And so I think I really need to get my feet on the ground and understand how do we want to run this. But I think the thing that I would commit to is it's important to me to solve that problem, to make the EHR implementation a success. And I just need to get involved and figure out where I can help the most.
Again, I like your answer. Mr. DelBene, how did your nomination come about?
Well, I retired from Microsoft after 30 years and was thinking through what I wanted to do next in my life. Service was important to me. So when the secretary, who I knew from working together on healthcare.gov, came to me and said, I'd like you to take on this role, I did some soul searching. It felt like a role where I can truly help a group of people that deserve our help. They deserve our help in how they transition from active service and throughout their lives. I spent time talking with my family and understanding, because this will be a sacrifice on us as an entire family, to just the logistics of we're in Washington State and a lot of the work is here. And so we talked about it, and I think we concluded together this was something that was an opportunity that I ought not to pass up, and we as a family ought not to pass up.
Thank you. Thanks for reaching that conclusion. Mr. DelBene, I often ask our witnesses if there's anything they'd like to add, something they wish to correct, something that wasn't asked of them. If there's something you'd like to add to the record, anything you'd like to tell me?
No, I think it's been a great set of questions and discussion so far. Will say that I am passionate about the opportunity to serve. I go into it not thinking that tech has all the answers, but rather my experiences can be useful here. I look forward to working with all of you to better serve veterans overall. I look forward to working with the organization that I'll be joining and understanding it better, understanding the people involved. And then the final thing I would say is that I get passionate about is not just the opportunity to transform the VA into a world-class technology organization, but it can also be an example of how we do that for all of government. It doesn't need to be a case where people say, we do this in the commercial sector, why can't we do this in government? We can do all of this in government too. And as systems become more and more a part of how we deliver care and services to our citizens, it becomes more and more important for us to have this world-class capabilities in government to do so. And I think we can do that.
Thank you for that answer. Let me put it in my words and see if you're saying what I think you said, which is there is no legitimate excuse to say we're government, we can't do this with IT. They can only do that in business.
I'm not sure I would put it in the negative sense of there's no excuse. I think the opportunity is in front of us to use these systems and these capabilities to deliver world-class services to our citizenry, and to create organizations where people are proud in what they're doing, that they're having this mission and delivering this to our citizens.
I'll try it one more time in the positive. The answer that I heard you say, the comment that I heard you make, was that we have every opportunity in the public sector to create a world-class IT system just as they have in the private sector.
Very well said.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
You said it. I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony, being with us today. I thank the committee members who participated today. The record of this hearing will remain open. This is different than usual till 9 a.m. tomorrow. My assumption is, and I haven't had this conversation recently with the chairman, but I think the intention is his desire to move this nomination quickly. So 9 a.m. tomorrow, the record will remain open. Please have any post-hearing questions in by then. And our committee stands adjourned.